Welcome everyone to the Song Collective Live. I'm 𝐓𝐴, and I'm so excited to collaborate with the Song Collective on tonight's event. We're excited to have everyone join us to watch this amazing conversation. But in the meanwhile, please feel free to put your name or location from where you're watching this discussion. We'll get started soon with Viet Playwrights Gone Rogue. But before we start, we would like to acknowledge our respective locations. I'm gathered on the ancestral lands of the Tongva, the 𝐓𝐴, and Chumash, also known as Los Angeles.
Hi, I'm David Lee Huynh.
I'm Carolina Doe.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Castanyon. The Song Collective is based on unceded Lenape-Hoking, land of the Lenape people territory, which spans from western Connecticut to eastern Pennsylvania, the Hudson Valley to Delaware, with New York City at its center. We recognize that this land was forcibly taken and sovereignty was never ceded. We acknowledge the brutal history of genocide, the displacement, and the dispossession of indigenous people from their ancestral lands.
We acknowledge that after stolen lands, there are also stolen people. We respectfully recognize and thank the generations of enslaved and displaced people who built and continue to build the country that we occupy today. We also recognize the long violent history of colonization and imperialism that has displaced generations of people from their ancestral lands, including ourselves. As Viet identifying folks who were resettled here in the US, we acknowledge our own complicity in enacting and contributing to the violence against and the erasure of the indigenous communities and other communities of color.
As Viets of Kin, the ethnic majority in Vietnam ancestry, we also recognize the long history of genocide, displacement, and oppression against indigenous populations in Vietnam that still continues in this very moment. As we gather in this virtual space, and one day soon, in a physical space, we acknowledge the legacies of colonization embedded in our technology, the land and the structures we use to connect with one another, and its disproportionate impact on indigenous communities and communities of color globally. We commit to honoring our collective ancestors, past, present, and future, who have and continue to steward the land. We invite our community to learn the history of the people who have walked the earth before us. We invite our community members to take accountability for themselves, one another, and to become better stewards of the earth. We call for the building of a new world that fights for true freedom and liberation of all who exist on this planet.
We'll get started soon with Playwrights Gone Rogue, but first, a musical performance from our friend 𝐂𝐿IA.
All right. Hi, I'm 𝐂𝐿IA. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm going to be playing two little songs. This first one's called Heard by You. Is it still a mistake if I do it when I'm sober? I've already gotten in the car. Is it really okay? You know, if I'm coming over, you and I take things way too far. And all of my friends give up trying to help me. I've got myself and only me to blame. If I could just quit you and do what they tell me, but I never change. 'Cause at least I know what I'm getting when I'm getting hurt by you. There's part of me that wants to bend and break the way you taught me to. And I wish I could trust that I'll find something good. But the only thing I feel's confused. At least I know what I'm getting when I'm getting hurt by you. Oh. Well, even our fights feel a little comfortable. It's a thing that you and I do. I know it's gonna feel like it's too impossible not to compare everybody to you. And all of my friends give up trying to help me. I've got myself and only me to blame. If I could just quit you and do what they tell me, but I never change. 'Cause at least I know what I'm getting when I'm getting hurt by you. There's part of me that wants to bend and break the way you taught me to. And I wish I could trust that I'll find something good, but the only thing I feel's confused. At least I know what I'm getting when I'm getting hurt by you.
Thank you guys. And the second one's called Sleep Talking.
My eyes are turning red, staring at the ceiling fan. Confessions underneath his breath. I don't think he knows. Hold him towards my chest. I'm holding him with both my hands. He's somewhere far away again when his eyes are closed. And I know when he wakes up, nothing I could do but hold my tongue and somehow try to breathe. And I know that he misses her, I know that he wishes her body was next to him instead of me. Why'd I hear him talking in his sleep? Why'd I hear him talking in his sleep? Screaming in my pillow, hiding under covers. Everything I know's a lie. When every little moment feels like they were stolen, like we're on borrowed time. Her kisses lingering on his mouth, dishes in the sink while we're playing house. He's keeping her close like she's still around. I'm fighting with a ghost who can take me down. And I know when I wake up, nothing I could do but hold my tongue and somehow try to breathe. And I know that he misses her, I know that he wishes her body was next to him instead of me. Why'd I hear him talking in his sleep? Why'd I hear him talking in his sleep?
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, 𝐂𝐿IA, for that amazing performance. As I said before, my name is 𝐓𝐴.
And I'm Jonathan Castanian. The Sống Collective's mission is to reclaim the Vietnamese American narrative by creating development and performance opportunities for emerging artists of color. We nurture a community of artists whose work explores questions of identity, race, intersectionality, immigration, and the refugee experience. We're dedicated to telling stories that dare to subvert preconceptions of Asian Americans. Jess is a remarkable advocate for the Vietnamese community, especially in entertainment. When she approached us with this idea, it was a perfect fit. We could not have been more excited and overjoyed to collaborate with her on this series.
Well, I appreciate your kind words. I am so excited to work with you guys on this. We've been friends for quite a bit, connected through the interwebs. But anyway, it's been a personal dream of mine to bring together Vietnamese playwrights from around the world. And in this case, it's the US, the UK, and Australia. I don't know about you guys, but I personally find the most interesting representation of Vietnamese people, Vietnamese stories, at least Vietnamese diaspora people and stories, on stage, from Vietgone trilogy in the US here to Summer Rolls, the first British Vietnamese play stage production in the UK. So, and that only premiered last fall. So that it just shows, you know, how far we've come, or just how much we have to go. Before we start, though, I'd like to thank our community partners. First, my lovely friends over at 𝐓𝐶, the Coalition of Asian Pacifics and Entertainment, VALA, the Vietnamese American Arts and Letters Association, East-West Players, and as well as Diacritics. We're so grateful for your support and all you do for our communities to create and uplift artists. With that said, I'll let our moderator, DIEP TRAN, take it away with our discussion.
Hello, everyone. My name is DIEP TRAN, or if you speak Vietnamese, it's 𝐓𝐴TrAN. And I am a journalist / critic and editor based in New York City. And thank you all for joining us, the Sống Collective, and all of the wonderful playwrights we're going to be talking to tonight in a conversation about the Vietnamese diaspora and portraying that on stage. And my name is 𝐓𝐴TrAN, and I've written for the New York Times, NBC Asian America, American Theater Magazine. I am currently the managing editor of VietFactCheck.org, where we fact check the news. And so if you know any Trump supporters in your family, and I'm sure you do, send them our stuff. Okay, shameless plug over. And you may know me from the essay I wrote about how much I hated Miss Saigon, which we may talk about that tonight as well. But first, I wanted to acknowledge that I am in New York City, which is the ancestral home of the Lenape people. And I'm going to turn it over to QUI NGUYEN next to introduce himself.
Hey there, I'm QUI NGUYEN. My pronouns are he, him. I'm gathering remotely for this event on the ancestral lands of the Chumash and Tongva, aka Sherman Oaks, California. I am a playwright / screenwriter, TV writer. You may know me from writing stuff like She Kills Monsters and Vietgone. I have an upcoming movie called Raya and the Last Dragon through Disney. That's who I am.
No big deal with Disney, right?
No.
And can we get Tuyen on here?
Hello everyone. My name is Tuyen Do, or TUYEN, or TN, depending on who's speaking to me. And my pronouns are she, her. I am an actor, writer, and I am gathering remotely from London, UK, and I'm not sure whose ancestral home that is. I think it's a land of immigrants, actually, even though they don't believe that. Yes, and I'm known for play summer roles, if you know me at all, because I'm from the UK.
And can we get 𝐩𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐶 on here?
Hello everyone. Thank you. My name is Chi, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm on the lands of the Wadawurrung, and that's part of the Kulin Nation in southwest Victoria, Geelong.
This is so wonderful. Like, we somehow got a call with 4 people and 4 completely different time zones, and one person who's in a completely different season than the rest of us. So welcome, all of you. Thank you for making the time to talk about how to be a Vietnamese playwright in Western countries. And the first thing I wanted to ask you all, and just give me the really short version of your family story.
The really short version of our family story?
Like the elevator version, if you're selling it to a studio.
My parents are both from Vietnam. They met at a refugee camp in Northwest Arkansas, and they had sex and had me.
He's done this before, guys.
Okay, I was born in Vietnam, and we escaped by boat when I was 5, and I was on a refugee island for a year. So by the time I got to Australia, I was 6. And there's 5 kids and 2 adults.
I was also born in Vietnam. I'm the youngest of 7, and very much like someone else, my mum put my eldest brother on a boat, and he ended up on a British tanker, and ended up in the UK. And then and then in the early 80s, the British government was accepting a number of refugees, and the rest of us came over on a plane rather than on a boat. Yeah.
Oh, the same thing. My 2 older sisters were put on a boat, but we came on a plane in 1990s.
Yeah, I carry a lot of guilt about that. Yeah, I carry a certain amount of guilt that I came on a plane rather than a boat.
Yeah, but none of us like boats, so it all works out.
So true.
And how's your fluency doing, Angie?
I understand a lot more than I can speak, mostly to do with the vocabulary. My accent's pretty good, but yeah, I get stuck on Vietnamese vocab, especially when it kind of ventures beyond, the everyday conversation you might have around the family home.
Yeah, I'm very similar to Chi in that sense, and I've just recently started trying to pick up my Vietnamese and having Vietnamese lessons, and one of the things I've only just sort of realized, my teacher was saying, no, don't try and translate, just try and communicate the sentiment, the idea when you're speaking Vietnamese, because what I was been trying to do was like thinking English, translate it in Vietnamese, except my vocab is really bad, so I just go yeah, gone. So that's really helpful in terms of like, getting a language you already kind of know better, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm super similar. I understand quite well. I don't have I can't call down words from my brain fast enough to be conversational about it. But if you threw me in the middle of a Vietnamese restaurant, I would do quite well. But that's probably about as far as it goes.
Yeah, we lost all of our words except for food, right?
Yeah, exactly. My food words are right there.
And it's so funny because all 3 of you have written about being Vietnamese abroad, and Quay, I know it's about your family story specifically, but doing NG, I don't know if Summer Rolls or Colored Aliens was a first person perspective from the 2 of you, but I'm just curious, in researching those stories, and like, did you have any conflict in like difficulty in terms of the language barrier and getting your family members to talk about it so that you can have some material to work with?
G, you want to go?
I'm happy for you to go. I mean, I don't mind.
Okay. Well, I mean, Summer was very much inspired by my own experience, though it is mostly a fictionalized story. But in terms of like how, the older brother coming over first and all of that sort of thing is very much my family story. So in terms of like research, well, it is really difficult. I read a lot of oral history. I read it, I watched a lot of kind of accounts from a lot of other Vietnamese people. But when it comes to my own family, they don't really speak. they kind of, I'll ask a question, but it doesn't come, it just comes in. So most of it is from memory. It's like my own memories that have sort of landed on the page rather than a sort of a kind of verbatim account of anything. Does that make sense? So it's an amalgamation of all my kind of experience that I've just put into a narrative.
I'll go. The my latest play, Coloured Aliens, is a two-hander. So it's about a Vietnamese Australian playwright and her security guard white Anglo-Australian boyfriend. And so there is an element of autobiography there, but obviously in order to create dramatic conflict, you know, the two characters had to do a lot more, you know, there had to be a lot more kind of angst and tension between the two of them. The work before that, I'm not going in sequence, but there was a work before that called 𝐓𝐴𝐷𝐴, an installation performance. And that started because I'd been commissioned to write a children's book, a nonfiction about Vietnamese culture. And so I did all this research about 𝐷, you know, the Lunar New Year, and 𝐵𝐷𝐴, the kind of the savory kind of cake that is made for the Lunar New Year, bánh chưng, bánh Tết, right? Bánh tét. And then so I had all this research, the project fell through. And then I thought, oh, why don't I use the research to make a play? And then so then the work actually had 4 sections where each section took place on a Lunar New Year, but in different time periods. So one was in ancient Vietnam when, you know, that story about Prince Tiết Liêu, you know, in the kind of cooking competition that happened, and so that was the invention of the bánh chưng. And then the second one was during the Mậu Thân, you know, like the Tet Offensive. And then so I did research for that, so that's kind of news reports. And then there's another section set in Australia, or the kind of diasporic space that I kind of thought of as the cosmic kitchen that is eternally in between nations and cultures. So yeah, so I don't know if that has answered your question, Dib.
What was the research process like for that, or any of your other plays about war or the Vietnamese experience?
Yeah, it depends on the project, but usually it's quite intuitive. So once you get into the zone of a project, then you're seeing it everywhere. So you read the newspaper and you'll find ideas that are obliquely related. And then you're watching movies and you're also finding ideas, you know, like touches, textures, tones. But obviously with the bánh chưng one, with the historical element, I, you know, read newspapers, kind of watch YouTube clips from you know, films or whatever. So yeah, it depends on how research heavy the project is. Obviously, Coloured Aliens didn't require much research.
Yeah, Quay, on that topic, and since you don't speak Vietnamese, how did you interview your parents for Vietgone?
Well, my parents speak well enough English and Vietnamese. I understand Vietnamese, and they speak well enough English that the moments that I got completely lost, we were able to translate through it. I mean, like, you know, it's the story of how I got material for Vietgone. It always feels like I've talked about it so much in so many different other venues, but basically the story goes, I spent many years trying to get my parents to talk about it, and I'm sure much like your parents, like, they didn't want to talk about any of it, right? They kind of give you one-word answers, or you know, like my mom especially, you would go, hey mom, what was Vietnam like? She would always end up giving me some kind of fable story about how I need to be a better son, listen to her, and not be a playwright. Like, it was some version of some kind of piece of propaganda of how I'm not being a good enough son. Anyways, ultimately, like, realizing that, you know, if I was going to get them to speak about it in any type of honesty or fun, I had to get them both drunk. And so that's what I did. That was something my dad, like a lot of folks, a lot of parents, loves, loves his, Hennessy, and loves his, good old green bottled beer. And we commenced to drink a lot. And there's kind of two techniques that I used. Technique one was realizing that like a lot of Asian parents, they really hate the idea of having stupid children. So one, I asked them very obvious questions and pretended like I didn't know the answers to get them mad at me, to force them to say shit, to correct me. Not that it was ever this dumb, but it was like the version like, hey, just a reminder, the Vietnam War was a war between Vietnam and Spain, right? And then they would just lose their shit, like, why are you so fucking stupid? Here it is. And they would just drop some truth on me. And the other thing that kind of is the thing, the reason why Vietgone, my play, became kind of a quote unquote sex comedy, was the moment when my parents both watched me wig out, when the family story of how they met was just kind of like destroyed in front of my eyes, which was the story I knew, the one I grew up with, was they met in a refugee camp. It was love at first sight, and they were together forever. And then I was like 30 something years old, and I was like, okay, I know how you guys met. It was love at first sight, blah, blah, blah. And my mom just lost her shit laughing. And I was like, why are you laughing? She's like, well, because you're 30 now, and you know that shit's not real, right? And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, we just had sex, a lot of sex. And then at some point we kind of just stayed together. And I wigged out. I was like, that's really disgusting. Like, I don't want to imagine you as real human beings at all that need things. And because they were so tickled by that, they just kind of told me more stuff to just gross me out. The other element was they didn't know that I was writing a play about them. I told them I was doing a play about general Vietnamese people that's completely fictionalized, and the more specific, they could tell me stuff, the better the play could be. And because they were so tickled by this, they kept on telling me stories, and somewhere maybe 45 minutes into it, it suddenly dawned on them that it was actually a play about them, and they're like, please do not write about this. And I, being a good son, said, absolutely, I promise never to tell your story. And then a year later, Vietgone was made. But that's pretty much, my experience of writing that play. But I mean, I think that's my third play in trying to write about my folks. My first two tries were fucking terrible. But it took many, I think, tries to get to the thing. Am I swearing too much? I should stop. I am a bad kid.
Oh no, it's amazing. Please keep swearing. Like, we want you to do
Okay. I'm sorry. Especially everyone has like beautiful accents, and like redneck me shows up like, I'm from Arkansas. Listen to my voice, and like, terrible. So I apologize. You guys sound so elegant. Anyways.
So speaking of being bad Vietnamese kids, why did you all want to become artists? What was it that made you want to do this when there was no one that looked like us doing this?
I thought we were going in order. I thought we were established the order. And we're like very quiet, like Asians in the back of the class. He's like, I'm not raising my fucking hand. No way. So is there an order? Or we're not doing that? I misunderstood instructions at the top of the meeting before this started. Is there not an order?
What, there were instructions?
Was there instructions?
Reading this thing.
I know. That's why I became an artist. Actually, that's why I became an artist. It's because I'm bad at instructions, and I like inventing rules.
Oh, well, who knows why they become an artist? I think it is like a. I didn't realize till recently that it was. For ages, I would like say things that I thought was the answer. Why I became an artist? Oh, because of representation. There wasn't anyone like me, and all of that. But then, actually, I think I've actually been this way since as long as I can remember. But I just didn't have the courage to do anything about it until my late 20s. So. And then I was just like completely taken over by self-doubt and all of this sort of stuff that I think all artists go through. But I think if you're as a sort of someone who doesn't see themselves, I think that is 100-fold. I don't know, but you know, I felt it a lot, and it's only recently I've just thought, you know what, I'm doing myself a disservice. I became an artist because I was called upon to express myself, to want to share a story, to kind of, you know, I didn't write Summer Roads because I wrote it because I had to write it. I felt like it was like I was compelled to write it. I wasn't, you know, it's not because I want fame and fortune or any of that sort of stuff. And the more links I made with the Vietnamese community or other Vietnamese artists, or, you know, it was like suddenly I found a tribe. But also before that, I found the tribe in just the acting and artistic community, where everyone is a bit other. There's like a breakout of like this sort of quite confined box of being Vietnamese, being a good Vietnamese girl, good Vietnamese woman. You know, you have to be this and that, and get married and have children and all of that sort of traditional stuff, which is all great. But it, you know, when I found a group that was just like from everywhere, of different sexualities, and like all of these, it sort of opened my mind. You know, I felt like the world had opened up for me, and that I was no longer asleep. So for most of my teens and my 20s, I felt like I was asleep. I was like, you know, I wasn't really engaging with the world at all. And I don't know whether that is something to do with being Vietnamese or just being Nguyen. You know, I can't make the distinction, but that was my experience. And so when I meet like young kids, especially the young Vietnamese kids, they're like in their like mid-20s, and I say, oh, I'm too old to like even start acting or writing. I'm like, no, you're not. But this ageism, please just get rid of it. You know, so so yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
I have a follow-up then. What was the turning point in your late 20s? Did you see a play? Did you join an acting company? Like, what happened?
So I was running a restaurant with my sister, and at first it was actually quite fun, but then it became quite not fun, and it was actually a link with my mum as well, because it was a time where we spent a lot of time together, and it was really nice and all of that, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do. And I always wanted to do it. I always wanted to act, but I didn't have I never spoke. I was told that I was very quiet at school and I would never speak, right? But I danced. So I loved dancing. I just loved expressing myself, but I couldn't put it into words. I couldn't say it, you know. And so the restaurant was really good for me because it forced me to talk to people. It forced me to interact. And then from that, like, there was lots of actors and directors that used to come into the restaurant, and then I would express to them, oh, I'd like that. And then it was just a word of encouragement, to be honest. It was like, if you want to do it, then just do it. And then at that point, I'm like, I'm 26 going on 27. I can do what I want now. Like, it just dawned on me, I can actually do what I want. I don't actually have to like do exactly what my parents tell me. And then it was just a slow burn from then on, you know, of discovery. You know, it was a journey of discovery, and it still is, to be honest.
Who wants to tell their origin story next? Come on.
I feel like we're on like a dare right now. Like, mine's not. Mine's not that interesting. I feel like I became an artist like I don't actually call myself an artist all that often, but I feel like I ended up here in an interesting series of failures, right? Like, I feel like when I was a kid, I never even had the idea that you could do this for a living. Like, I didn't even think that this was a job, right? Like, I kind of fell into theater because I kind of failed at being a football player. Like, when I was in junior high, I wanted to play football. At a certain moment, I stopped growing, and everyone was way bigger than me. And then when we went on the field, I got hurt. And I was like, oh, this really sucks. I can't do that anymore because physically I am small. And so my best friend at the time basically looked up, and we were hanging out in school, and we saw some cute girls that went to go audition. And I was like, hey, I would love to find a way to talk to them. So I'm going to follow them in that audition so I can have at least a shared experience to talk to them about it. And then I ended up getting in the play and really enjoying it. And then, of course, I went to college thinking that I'd be a journalist. I thought, I love writing, but I need to do something practical. Otherwise, my parents will disown me. And so I went there for journalism. And about 1 week into that journalism program, my first assignment was to go and cover the 4-H club. And I was like, oh, wait, this isn't what I want to do. I want to write like interesting, like opinion pieces, like funny stories, like, and they're like, you don't just get to do that. You have to be a feature writer. There's steps. It's like, well, if this is one of the steps, I don't want to do this. And so then without telling my parents, I changed my major, went over to the theater department and was like, hey, I would like to be a theater major. I'm just going to apply. I'm going to audition and be an acting major. And that's what I did. I went and became an acting major for my undergrad. 4 years into that, by my senior year, I discovered I was which unbeknownst to me, as I was getting this acting degree, I realized I was a very bad actor. And I was like, oh, I'm not getting cast a lot. Oh, it's because I'm Asian. And so I started writing plays so I could be in them. And then realizing that everyone in my play was really good except me. And I wrote it. And then it dawned on me, oh shit, I'm the weakest link. The reason why I'm not getting cast is I don't know how to remember text and say it correctly. So maybe I should do something else. And then my senior year, I went into a huge panic. And my professors are like, well, you clearly have an aptitude to writing stories. Why don't you do that? And so to avoid real life for an extra 3 years, I applied for grad school. The infamous story goes, I got into Yale, but my immigrant parents, who didn't really know what Yale was, told me it was too expensive. You should go to this other school because they'll pay your way. And that would be a good school to go to. And so I went to not Yale, I went to Ohio University instead, which was fine because that's also where my girlfriend was at. And went there for 3 years. I followed another girlfriend to New York. And at that point, because I followed someone to New York, I think my heart was I wanted to write screenplays, but I didn't. But I was in New York, and it's more of a theater town, so I thought, oh, I'll just write plays with my friends and kind of write the plays I always wanted to do. And that's kind of how I ended up becoming a playwright. Yeah.
What I get from that story is that you follow girls.
That might be true too. That might be part of what my origin story entails. So
you could have been a scientist if the girls
were
into
the best
science.
scientist. It would have been amazing.
Yeah, his plays are very female oriented, so maybe that's also why.
They are, aren't they? So.
Oh my goodness. Jay, like you didn't start off doing theater, right? Like you were.
Yeah, I started writing prose. So even in high school, I was writing, short stories, and at 16, I had a teacher send my stuff into a literary magazine to get published, and then we received a rejection letter, and it said it was very, this is promising but very prosaic, and I'm like, what's prosaic mean? And 16-year-old Chi was like, what have you made me do? I've been rejected. And the teacher was fantastic. He said, you're going to get a lot of rejections if you're going to be an artist. And there was no kind of being condescending, the magazine is wrong or anything like that. It's just, this is the reality, right? And I didn't see myself as a writer at all. Again, like QUI, I just didn't, know that was an option or a career. And so I enrolled into commerce at university because the recession was on, and I was interested in why. Why was there a recession? My family had been through this, horrific kind of economic experiment that was communism, right? And then which we left, and now at the time, Australia was in a recession. So I wanted to know how the world worked, right? And so I did commerce, was terrible at kind of some subjects like accounting, like couldn't do it. And then was kind of good with macroeconomics. I'm actually a trained economist. And yeah, and then second year I enrolled in one of the art subjects. It was something like, I can't remember which one. And I did really well, like without putting as much effort in. I did really well. And again, the lecturer sent off something I wrote to a magazine, and it got published. And I thought, wow, that's an accident. So, and then, then I wanted to try to write something to get published. So that was much harder, deliberately kind of writing to get published. I felt like a fake. And I probably didn't get published for a really long time because, like when you do something unintentionally, that kind of beginner's mind thing, it's actually quite helpful. You kind of just trying stuff out and suddenly it seems to work or whatever. But when you try to do it deliberately, it's a lot more kind of self-conscious and difficult, etc. So and then I wrote more stuff and got involved at university level in my first play. And so I was on stage for the first time, having been brought up to be the kind of obedient Vietnamese girl who doesn't speak up, right? And I just felt like I was going to vomit and faint at the same time at the sight of, all the kind of eyes and teeth in the audience. It was like this massive monster kind of in the dark just waiting for me. And I managed to say whatever, the 3 lines that I had to say. And and then was like hooked on theatre. It was so fun. And, like the camaraderie of theatre and how the theatre games, the theatre games, all that stuff was brilliant for someone who kind of had grown up without those, in a very hierarchical structure in terms of the family. And so socially, I felt it was so much fun, and there was a lot of creativity and energy. And so, during the summer holidays, the school break, I kind of rang up my local art centre and said, do you have any plays going? And I got involved in a little community theatre group, and we did lots of projects in high schools. So, and then I started writing for these projects. I started facilitating. So I'm we would work with at-risk teenagers and kind of create a play with them, using their ideas, sometimes their stories, and then we would train them to act in them. So in terms of kind of, doing social good, it was fantastic for that kind of thing. But after, 16 years of that, I felt like, starting to feel like the narratives are very similar. I'll backtrack a little bit. There was one, 2 years in or 1 year into kind of working in community theatre, I thought, I'm going to write a funding application, because it's time I knew how to write a funding application. I won't get it, but why not? So I wrote this funding application with an idea for a play, A Story of Soil. And then I showed it to my housemate, and he's like, I would double the request amount. And I'm like, well, I won't get it anyway. So, I doubled the request amount, sent it in, and then came back. I got my first funding application. It was quite a massive amount of money for a, young person back then. And I'm like, oh my God, now I have to learn how to write a play. Like a full-length play, not just like little scenes, right? And so I had to teach myself how to write a play, because at university I only did kind of creative writing for short stories. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and there's this line in Colored Aliens I really like, which is, when the character of Mai says, I write Vietnamese issues because there are no books or TV shows or plays with people like me when I was a kid. And have you all approached the way that you write Vietnamese people with that kind of intentionality?
I think I did at the very start. So certainly with the story of soil, it was like, you know, there's the older Vietnamese generation, and at the time they were really hanging on to the old songs to get through their grief and trauma. And so it felt like for a long time, Vietnamese culture, as I kind of experienced it, didn't move forward. They were listening to the beautiful old songs, wonderful. But, you know, there was, you know, a small community in Australia. There weren't artists who were writing new songs or, you know, as far as I knew. And then you had the kind of Western or Australian culture, which at the time was very white, super white. There were only 2 Asians on TV when I grew up. And so it was like, well, you know, there's these polar opposites. There's nothing in the middle for someone like me. I feel like I have to create something like that. But, you know, later on, I don't feel that sense of responsibility at all. So The Dead Twin is not about Vietnamese people directly. I mean, it's about war and trauma, but the characters like Barbara and, you know, yeah, Howard, etc.
Thuy, do you want to take it?
Me?
Thuy or
Thuy? Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
When you set out to write Vietnamese characters, because Thuy, you said summer roles you had to write it, and so did you write it because there's not enough stories about us by us?
I think that was probably probably a reason. I mean, what Summer Roles came out of a sort of writing program by a new writing theatre, leading new writing theatre called the Royal Court in London. And they do a program called Unheard Voices, which is essentially, you know, asking scripts from a very specific ethnic group per year. And this was the first year they did writers from East Asia, right? And I'd never written anything before, but I saw it and I was like, you know, my mom's really funny, so I'm just gonna I find my mom's like incredible woman and she's hilarious, so like I'm just gonna send something in. And then I got on it, and then the end of the course you're supposed to write a full-length play, like literally from nothing to full-length play in 3 months. And I was like, oh my gosh, what like this, because you haven't got that many stories out there that reflects you. It's like there is so much of it. Like you don't, you know, there's like, I think my family story is just so big, you know. And we were taken to see Arnold Wesker's Chicken Soup and Barley as like, you know, inspirational point. And I saw that and I thought I could actually do a Vietnamese family like that spans, you know, 20 years and has that sort of expansiveness where I could actually put into the play that generational divide and try and find a way of getting underneath it, you know what I mean? You know, underneath that sort of weight of trauma that we kind of carry around with us without knowing. And yeah, so I don't know whether I intentionally did it, but it was very much, it's just, that's just the reality of it, I think. And I don't think you can intentionally do something and it be, it's a bit like how Chi was saying, like trying to write to be published. It's similar to that sort of thing. Like you need, it has to come from somewhere else, I think.
Chloe, what about you? Like your first play was about your cousin on a boat.
Yeah, my very, very, very first play was that. Like, I think that at the very heartbeat of what made me decide to want to write in the first place was there's 3 things that made me want to be a writer. One was I wanted to tell my family story. 2, I wanted to write a superhero or make a hero that looked like us. And 3, to create heroes generally for people who don't often get to see themselves that way on screen or on television. And so my very first dream was to write my family story, and I did that, but that was my first play, and it was terrible. Like I jokingly say that's terrible, but it was literally like one of the worst things I ever written in my life. And it's mainly because not so much the content, but it was mainly because of the fact that I was trying to imitate other artists. I had not written anything before, so I tried to imitate David Henry Wong and Diana San, her structure, his language, but it didn't sound like me. And so I was also very open to listening to every note on the planet from quote unquote people who knew more about the subject than myself. And so then suddenly the story wasn't even my family story. Like my family went and saw it and they're like, that's not us. And that was a very telling thing. And at that point I decided at 25 or 24 when that happened, that I would not write about this shit ever again until I was super, super old and mature enough to pull it off. And so then basically that was 15 years of not avoiding anything that dealt with my race or my heritage. And I just centered on kind of creating the art that I think I'm kind of known for, which is this geek theater thing called Vampire Cowboys, which was literally making superheroes for those who don't get to see themselves that way. And it incorporated a whole bunch of hip hop, pop culture, stage combat, puppetry, multimedia, things like that kind of made me who I am. And luckily somewhere in there, like it kind of caught on, and enough that like major regional theaters here in America decided to commission me and get me to do things for them. And at that time, I still knew that I had a very vulgar, kind of edgy voice that didn't quite fit major regional theaters. I think I kind of scared people a little bit. And so when I was offered an opportunity to write a play for this theater called South Coast Repertory Theater, South Coast Rep, I decided at this point I had just had kids, and I was looking at my parents and they were getting older. And I kind of had that epiphany, that moment where I was like, you know what, I'm never going to be this older, mysterious, this kind of mythical older version of myself that is so mature that they know how to write without dropping F-bombs. I think I'm going to have to write this play. Otherwise, or am I just going to wait around for my parents to die and then write it? And I was like, fuck it, I'm going to write it now. I'm just going to incorporate the voice of who I am. I'm going to write it, and I'm going to sabotage the chance for it to be produced at this major regional theater. I'm just going to write it, make it me, and then my little theater company, Vampire Cowboys, will produce it in downtown New York in like a 99-seat theater. And that's totally fine. That's what I want to do. And so I wrote Vietgone, and it kind of became a much bigger thing than I ever expected. And now that my kids are getting older and my family's, they're getting old, my parents are still around. I think that I do more consciously write about things that affect my community because of Vietgone, eyeballs of my community suddenly turned to me and started looking at me in a way they never had before. I generally had the eyeballs of the general theater community, which was, a diverse community, but not really that of a Vietnamese or an Asian community looking at myself. And then suddenly I got that attention of that. And I realized I had a responsibility of being a person that had a voice, that had attention. And so I started now seeking out opportunities to highlight and tell those stories, because Vietnamese people deserve superheroes too. People from Southeast Asia deserve superheroes. And so obviously there was Vietgone. I wrote a follow-up to that called Poor Yellow Rednecks that got canceled all over the planet because of COVID. And obviously I'm writing or wrote Raya and the Last Dragon with Adele Lim, which is about a Southeast Asian superhero, basically. And so it's very much like something that I now consciously pursue and am conscious of, mainly because the motivation is very pure, and that's to write something that my kids can watch. For Vietgone, it's something for them to understand where they're from and their grandparents. And for Raya, it's for them to have a superhero that they can look up to and emulate. And so I think, but like Tuan, like I think it came late in my career. It wasn't something that was early. I didn't find it right away.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of opportunities, because QUI and TUYEN, like you both have your own, you both created your own company. And so like, what was and you all have been in this industry for like years like a really long time now. And so like, what has been the key to just like getting opportunities and getting your foot in the door, or in like the important meetings where people will take you seriously?
Shall I go? I mean, that's only recently happened to me, and Summer Wars took me nearly 7 years to actually get off the ground. Mostly because I struggled with it a lot. It was like an identity journey thing, but also everyone said no to it. Like even sort of East Asian companies say no to it, and I had people who really loved it and encouraged me as an artist. But as anyone who was going to take it on, no one wanted it. And I just remember one person saying to me, "Oh, well, it's just another immigrant story." And I was like, "No, it's not just, it's my story. Stop." You know, and so the reason why, you know, Văn Thân exists is because I had no choice. Like, again, like it was that sort of thing. Well, you know, I met a Vietnamese producer, and I said to her, like, I've had this play, like, and I think I'm just going to give up on it. And she convinced me not to. And she was like, no, do not give up on it. We're going to do it together. So we did the funding, we did everything together and made it possible. And it was only by doing that actually, like, yeah, then suddenly, like, you get all this attention. I was like, where were you before? I mean, like, where the hell were you? But it's that sort of thing. It was a really big lesson to learn, and people say it all the time. In this industry, you kind of do have to make your own luck, because no one's going to give you no one's going to give you a kind of, you know, free pass. You have to sort of prove yourself. And it's like a chicken and the egg thing, where you're kind of like, well, how do I prove myself? Because, and yeah, and so it was just serendipity that I met a Vietnamese producer who's kick-ass and kicked my ass, and yeah, and it happened. Was that your question?
Yeah, how did it happen? Yeah. Well, how does it happen? I think a lot of people want to know, who want to get into this industry. Like, there's always some luck into it, right? Like, you always have to know the right person, or someone had to have advocated for you. So, like, how did you all get your break, as they say?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about like that luck that comes out of it, was definitely like the first show I ever did, like even before the play that I wrote, Trial by Water, was this play that I put together called Stained Glass Ugly, that was basically cast by my roommate and my director's girlfriend. And we rehearsed in our living rooms, and we put it in the Midtown International Theater Festival, the small theater festival in New York. But it was our first show out of grad school, and I didn't know I had to, or neither one of us knew we had to do things like, you know, tell people about it or advertise to have people see your show. You just assume, like in grad school, you do a show, people show up because, you know, teachers force them to. And no one saw our play except for two reviewers, Martin Rochelle Denton from nytheater.com when that was still around, and a young lady named Abby Marcus, who was in the house. I had run into her. I was renting a rehearsal space from her, and I told her about it, and she came to see it. And and as the story goes, after seeing the play that she was the only real audience member of, she was like, "Oh, you two are good artists, but you don't know shit about producing anything." And so she was like, "Look, how about we make a deal? I will produce you guys, and you guys get to be as weird as you fucking want to be." And so that began Vampire Cowboys, very much as a real entity, as a real theater company. And I always say that the big trick of it all was having a person on our team that was as passionate about producing theater as I am about writing theater, as Robert is about directing theater. Because so often theater companies are, you know, you're kind of having to put on the producer's hat because you have to, but you don't really have a love for it. It's not like, well, it's a necessary evil. But Abby loved it and still loves it. And that's why we're still around, why even at the moments when I'm like really frustrated about theater, or if I have anything to say about it, she always like puts up ideas that will get me jazzed to get me keep going. I mean, there is an advantage that she has being my wife. You know, going on this whole theme of me following women. I'm married, but that's kind of the secret of my company. I married a producer, and she kept producing me.
Oh my gosh, she's dear Kanye. She made you famous.
That's fantastic, Key. I think that's a great strategy. Yeah, I think early on I kind of did produce my own shows, and that's how you get stuff on, especially if your stuff is kind of in between genres and stuff, and forms. And then you know, because I follow the idea, so sometimes the idea is not a play. You know, at one stage I wanted to write this thing about you know, 𝐓𝐴𝐺𝐴, which is like an old Buddhist tale, but I wanted to adapt it to kind of 1980s Melbourne. And the story is basically a guy sitting and meditating, right? And 6 months in, I'm like, there's no dramatic conflict here. This is not a play. This is a prose work. Interiority, right? And so I had to kind of swap it around and write it as a novella. But you know, so for the amount of time I wrote that piece, I was just not making theatre. It's so yeah, I follow the kind of path of the idea, and sometimes it's not theatre.
But how do you get people to invest in your idea?
Oh, right. I think, you know, an artist needs to have a sense of when their idea is kind of polished enough to tell other people. So, you know, there's a bunch of ideas. Some of them are shinier than other ideas. You pick up the shiny ideas and you add to it. You kind of, you know, it's almost like growing crystals for me. It's like, so you have an idea and then it sort of grows, it gathers, right? And at some point it's kind of substantial enough to be able to show or tell other people. So that's kind of from the artist's point of view. I guess in terms of, you know, telling other people, there are heaps of opportunities to kind of, you know, tell different people. So it's just about kind of knowing who's around and what kind of work they're interested in.
Okay, I believe we only have less than 5 minutes left. So plug whatever it is you're doing right now. Or give advice to the people watching about how they can stay sane and become better artists during this time.
Well, I'll plug right now. I have a movie coming out. It's March 5th. It'll be in theaters and on Disney Plus Premium. Called Raya and the Last Dragon. March 5th. Stars Kelly Marie Tran and Awkwafina. I think it's a good one. You should check it out. As for advice, I would definitely say I don't know if it's advice or it's a point of inspiration, being the fact that, like, I think that if you're interested in doing what you do and you're like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough to do this, I think all you have to do is look at my ugly mug on the screen right now and realize that if this dude who has never been a good student, who's not very good at research, who has kind of failed his entire life at almost anything he tried at, if he could somehow find a career in doing something that he loves, then so can you. And I think that the only piece of advice I ever give any artist is you just got to find the thing that is so authentically you that only you can make it, right? Like, I think that the moment you stop trying to imitate your heroes and you start just figuring out who you are, that's the moment you become, you know, as she just said, like, when you pick out that shiny idea, that idea that only you can make is going to be the idea that begets you a career. And so that's my little piece of advice there.
Doing okay. Look out for the novel version of Summer Rose, which is planned for 2022. But actually, that's quite a long way in the future, because novels, I had no idea, take a very long time, and they have and they've got a lot more words, like a lot more words. So yeah, so that is something that's coming up, and I'm having to do a lot of research for that. But in terms of, but like, oh man, like everything Kui said, and someone said this to me, and I've actually, like, I think it's really good, is gather your it's like gather your believers, you know, listen to all the good stuff that people tell you, because there will be a lot of bad, like, rejections and all of that, because that just comes with being an artist or being a creator or an actor, writer, any of these things. But like, those believers are the people who you will keep in your heart, and like let them just like fill it up. And when you're feeling down, like, it just, you know, go back, have a grateful diary, do all of that sort of stuff, because it actually really works. I didn't do it, and then when I do do it, it really works. So, you know, and we all feel the same. I think that's the thing. We all have doubts. Everyone, no matter how successful they are, they have doubts. So you're not alone.
Just building on what Tuyen said about gathering your believers. So Young Jean Lee has an online kind of writing workshop. So you know, it's like 3 hours, and you follow her and kind of generate material, just kind of getting stuff out. And one of the things that she said at the end, which I thought was really good, was, you know, when you have a first draft that's ready to, that, you know, is ready to show other people, show your peers. So, you know, don't kind of then send it, you know, that very first draft, don't send it off to the kind of gatekeepers who may not kind of understand it yet, or it's not ready to be understood yet, because the kind of power difference might mean that any negative feedback might crush you. Whereas if you kind of at that early workshopping stage, it's best to kind of show it to people you trust, your believers, and they're often your peers at first. So just kind of be kind of careful and gentle with yourself in those early drafts, because you don't want to kill off an idea before it's ready, before it's born, if you want to say it like that. I'm currently finishing a PhD, so I'm writing a creative project on the side, like I'm having an affair. But the main thing at the moment is finishing off the PhD.
Oh, congratulations! A PhD in what?
Oh, in creative writing, of course.
Amazing, amazing. So excited to see what you create after you finish it. And thank you all for joining us. Especially thank you, Jay, for waking up really early in the morning for doing this. But thank you all. If you're watching, follow all of these lovely people on social media, like read their plays. Most of it's published. And thank you all for watching. Oh, and support the Sống Collective. Okay.
Thanks, Deep.
Oh my God, that was amazing. Thank you so much to our amazing playwright panelists, QUI NGUYEN, TUYEN DO, 𝐓𝐶𝐞. Thank you so much for giving your time and having this amazing conversation. I don't know about everyone else, but I personally have learned so much and am so inspired by you all. Thank you to our amazing panelists, DIEP TRAN. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. So we want to let you know that we have a series of panels coming up. Our next panel will be next week, Thursday the 14th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time, featuring our screenwriters. And then the following week after that, so the following Thursday, we'll be having an actors panel. So please RSVP at the link below, and we hope to see you then. All right, good night.